Brilliant. Marco, would you mind
Yes,
introducing
yes,
yourself?
absolutely. So, I am an anthrozoologist, so I'm interested in the interaction of humans and other animals across societies, across time and space and context and cultural contexts and political contexts. Interaction of humans and other animals means sometimes the conflict of humans and other animals, the debate, the the contradictions, right? So in particular, I am passionate about canines, right? And anthrozoology, for that matter, is a multidisciplinary area of research. It integrates biology, philosophy, psychology, ethology, animal behavior, and more. So it's a multidisciplinary field. And I am passionate in particular about canines, uh, the broad realm of canines, meaning dogs, wolves, jackals, coyotes, foxes, and others. But in particular, I target dogs and free-ranging dogs. And I am interested in understanding also those differences in behaviors, in personality, in environmental niche, so the way they live, and um, how they change their behavior when they get adopted by people and become companion, for example, right? That we will discuss later.
Brilliant. It's so fascinating already listening to the research and everything that you've done. I can see Michelle grinning away there as well. And can't wait to hear about, your talk. So I'd like to get Michelle to introduce herself a little bit. Now, Michelle was the whole reason that this is actually happening, this talk. And that's why it's so exciting. So Michelle, over to you, please.
Yeah, hi, I'm Michele Kent. I'm owner of Wight Canine Therapy and a Galen Myotherapist. I live with six dogs, four of which are foreign rescues. And I work alongside a Romanian Rescue Charity, offering advice to adoptees, helping them understand these dogs and their complex characters and the struggles they have. Trying to live with this. And my real passion is Romanian rescue dogs. I reached out to Marco, as Kushla said, after reading his paper, Wellness or Hellness, rediscussing free-ranging dogs' welfare.
Brilliant. So we're going to have a discussion with Michelle later. Marco, I am just going to go back over to you and just say, what can you tell us about the domestication of canines? Where do we start?
Well, I can tell that it's a huge topic, controversial, complex, and with some relevant misunderstanding, especially the first and foremost, the main misunderstanding, that is to believe that domestication is something relating and exclusively relating to the past, while in fact domestication is happening right now in our bedrooms, in our living rooms, in our backyard, at our friend's place, wherever there is a dog living with some humans, regardless of the degree of proximity. That may be a ranging free dogs in India, a ranging free dog in India or Indonesia or Mexico. It may be a companion dog in Romania, in Italy, in the UK, in the US, wherever. Regardless of the degree of proximity to human, domestication is happening right now. And this is important to understand because is relevant to understand what happened in the past to the extent we can describe, because not everything is clear, and how that resonates and is still ongoing in our daily life nowadays, right? And that has strong connotation, strong correlation with the way we interact with dogs nowadays, We understand dog behavior, dog personality, dog psychology, dog environmental interaction, and so forth, right? So simply said, domestication, understanding domestication in all of its process from its beginning, wherever we may place it in time, till now, it's essential to understand where are we going alongside these other animals, four-legged animals who we call dog. And that is relevant to understand also our own evolution, our own development as humans. Because as we all know here in this gathering, where many people are coming with a lot of knowledge, with different knowledges, with different experiences. We are all dog passionate. As we all know, yeah, domestication and the interaction we have with our dog nowadays is as many faces, is multi-layered, has many aspects, is complex itself. The stories of individual dogs are so various. Dogs coming from a shelter, dogs coming from other homes, dogs coming from the street, dogs coming from animal welfare organization. So this complexity is not easy to handle and to grasp in all of its elements. Domestication is a core pair or lenses, if you want, that can help us in sometimes understanding certain aspects, especially in those situations where we interact with dogs and things are a bit complicated in regard to behavior, in regard to the history of the dog, in regard to the adaptation that the dog is, the struggles of the dog within a certain environment, right? So it's an important topic, and it's relevant for us today. Of course, if I may say something more, there are various stages that we can investigate, that we can explore a little bit later, through which this process of domestication went through and got to where we are now, and maybe is going somewhere. We can also speculate a few things in that sense, and that can be maybe to some extent helpful. It has been for me. It is for some of my colleagues, some of my clients. I do believe that is an interesting and important pair of lenses to look through those two species, humans and dogs.
That's fascinating, actually. Just the things that you said there is the fact that domestication is ongoing. That's really rings a chord, because it's Michelle's nodding as well, because it's not linear, is it? There's so many different facets to it, like you say. And it was interesting. We had also there's a video on our YouTube from a vet, Josie, in I think it was Brazil, who was saying that indigenous species there have only actually known dogs for like 40 years. So, they're only just embarking on that whole domestication process as well. So it's hard to understand that there might be people out there that don't have dogs living with them. But in some of those tribes, it was monkeys, or it might have been birds, and dogs have only recently become part of their life in 40 years. It's such a short period of time. So there's so much still developing, isn't there?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And there are many cases worldwide where there is that are expression of what you just beautifully said, called it as a non-linearity, right? Domestication, and also our interaction with other species in general, and with canines in particular, is a non-linear process. Our own evolution is a non-linear process. with some main trends, but with a lot of bumps and reversions and confusions, right? And so absolutely, this non-linearity is core also to understand, because it's a fractal principle. Fractal meaning that we can see that non-linearity as in the big time frame of the long-term domestication, as well as in the medium time frame of intermediate, what we call we may call as intermediate domestication, and also in the short-term domestication. So we can see that non-linearity in the time frame of a few thousand years, and we can see that non-linearity in the time frame of 2 months of a dog being adopted into a home and not struggling with adaptation to that new environment. So it's a fractal principle. We see the same principle in the big picture as well as in the small picture, in the big time frame as well as in the little time frame. And if to some extent we are aware of that, that can support the process of some dog parents, dog caretakers, or also some professionals that are helping parents and caretakers to deal with certain situations, right?
Because I presume also that dogs from different backgrounds would actually sort of experience domestication, if you like, if they're used to it and they've been bred, for example, and they're a known breed that maybe they have been bred within a domestic environment, and then go to a family is very different to the dog that may not have had that experience and might be coming from a different country, and then experiencing not only from a behavior point of view, but also from a physicality, because all of those things that we expect them to be able to cope with, they can't. The noises, the sounds, but also the flooring, the stairs, all of the physicality as well is going to affect them and impact them as well.
Absolutely. All of those factors are relevant, and also, of course, the individual preferences of the dog, because also every dog has individual preferences, right? So as I may like to go into nature, but I prefer a wood, and you prefer to go to the ocean, right? It's equally nature, but there are preferences, right? And I actually love the ocean, and I'm always at the ocean, but somebody may prefer go to see the snow where there is snow, and somebody may prefer warm environment with the or even the deserts, right? So just to make it, to simplify it a little bit, but it may be useful to put it that way. As we all know, dogs have individual preferences, individual characteristics, individual personality traits. So when the environment changed drastically, or even gradually, but the dog finds himself or herself into a completely different environment, and which may not be close to the dog's preference, that represent a further struggle for the dog to adapt, right? And that actually what happens when dogs are moved here and there. That requires a certain degree of adaptation. Maybe we can discuss more in detail this later. But it's also what happens throughout the entire process of domestication, with all of its slowing down, with all of its acceleration. But it is what has been required to that canine, to that species, to adjust continuously to the new environment, to the new, as we call that technically, environmental pressures. And those environmental pressures include a human pressure. And the pressure here doesn't mean to be pushy on the dog. It means just being present you know, when I let's say I enter into a pub in the UK, and now I am under the environmental pressure of the guy serving beer, or the lady maybe serving something else, and the guests of the room, you know, that becomes the environment under which I am environmentally pressed, meaning I am influenced by that, right? So I may understand that in that environment people wear the shoes, so I don't take the shoes away, as I would do if I enter into a mosque somewhere else in the UK, because that other environment, the mosque, has another environmental pressure on me. That is, I enter and I see that everybody is without shoes. So that environmental pressure tells me that I should take the shoes off. And this is what dogs have been doing throughout domestication since the beginning, wherever this beginning may have been placed. And we need to be a bit flexible in that, because there is no absolute agreement on where that started and when that started. There are various theories that may have started somewhere in what we call today nowadays Europe. It may have started in what we call nowadays Asia, but at some point and somewhere, maybe multiple places, this process of domestication started. That is, those canines, for some reason, intentionally or unintentionally, or both, or something else, for some other reasons, started to be involved under that human environmental pressure, as we have described, right? They find themselves under the human pressure. They entered, as following the example I made before, they entered the pub, and all of a sudden now they're in the pub, and they see those people that they don't know, and they have to figure out, how do they behave? Do they drink beer, or do they eat sandwich or a salad? Maybe they can get some salad out of this, you know. Or they can ask for something in the pub, right? And but they need to know the language. They need to, you know, they need to understand the behaviors of people. I cannot enter the pub and jump on the table and say, I want a beer, right? Maybe they get happy with that, or maybe they kick me out, right? So that's the environmental pressure dogs went through when they start to enter humans' environments, right? And what were those human environments? Where people were living, you know, probably, most likely, when we as humans were start to slowing down and shifting from a hunting-gathering lifestyle to a settling and agricultural, and then later became agricultural lifestyle, right? So we were becoming a bit more sedentary, a bit more migrant, right? A bit less migrant, a bit more sedentary. And so somewhere that period, which may be placed somewhere in between, let's say, a large range, 25,000 and 15,000 years ago. So across that large range. For some theories, it may have happened even earlier than that. For some, a bit later. For some, maybe 12,000 years ago. But regardless, we keep it open, because we're struggling as a scientific community, let's say, to figure out those details. But for sure, at least there is agreement on that at some point it started. It started to happen. It didn't happen through one night, but it started to happen, right? It started
and
to
also
happen.
I suppose there would have been those dogs that would have been domesticated, if you like, and would have been living with humans and would be interacting with them. But there would also be dogs that probably wouldn't as well, that would perhaps choose to stay away.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes into the various theories, right, of domestication, which may be useful also to review briefly, right? Because, for example, there is the commensal theory, commensal meaning that sharing food, right? So, and that would be also called in some cases the self-domestication of dogs. That is, dogs started to approach dogs. Wait. Be careful here. Let's dogs or wolves or a proto dog says, meaning an ancestor of a possible ancestor of what we know nowadays as dogs and the cows in the wolf, the gray wolf, for example, right? So maybe a proto dog or an ancient wolf that then split into wolves and dogs. Also there is no agreement. But let's say this canine started to approach those two legs animals that all of a sudden were gathering in certain places instead of moving around. And they got curious. Some of them got curious. The more brave, the bravest of them got closer to the villages. Not maybe they weren't really organized villages, but they were aggregations of humans, right? They started to get closer, and by getting closer and closer, those who were more brave got some benefit, right? So, and because they could scavenge in the human settlings at the border of the humans where there were maybe some leftover. This is one theory, the self-domesticated. So that self-domesticated meaning that it was a choice which came from the canine to approach the humans, right? So they self-domesticated themselves in this theory, right? It wasn't human doing something specific, apart from settling somewhere and throwing some leftover around. It was the dogs who getting curious about humans.
Thought I could get something from this, yeah.
Yeah, they got close, right? So the commensal, the self-domestication, right? But there is also, let's say, an opposite version of it that tells a totally different narrative, right? Or narration, anyway. That is that humans, while we're still, in between, getting aggregated in some areas, but also going hunting, still hunting, and maybe this relates to a previous period. So we humans were still relying heavily on hunting. We noticed that there was this other animal, four-legged, very smart animal, functioning in a way that overall, after all, was also similar to us, because they were gathering in large groups and hunting on same animals we were also interested. Should we compete around that, or should we take advantage of that? And so some humans may have found interesting and opportunistic and advantageous to have some wolves around. Not just, for example, in some cases, also learning hunting, some hunting strategies from those canines. Sometimes I may say wolf or dog, but we clarify that may be a slippery term, and we are talking about a not really identified canine, right? So a possible wolf, a possible proto dog, certainly not a dog as we know dogs today, right? Not yet, an ancestor. And so in that other version, wolves, it was intentional from humans then to be around some wolves, right? So to be in the proximity of wolves, also because by having some wolves around that who maybe were getting acquainted, getting familiar with those people around, were also functioning as alert system, alarm system. If other animals were approaching, other wolves were approaching, or other human tribes or whatever were approaching, right? So in that case, it was human choice to some extent to be around wolves because that was advantageous, right? That's another possibility.
Yeah, those two theories, though, they don't have to be mutually exclusive, though, do they, in some ways?
Absolutely. They're not. They may be actually, until we don't have further clarity, we may think that all of those theories, those two and other theories too, may have happened in different degrees, in different places. Maybe all of those theories, or to different degrees, have contributed to this process of domestication, because it's a non-linear process, right? There are many doubts, many gray areas, right? And then, of course, there are other theories, like, for example, we may have heard about for example, the human selection that may have started also back in the centuries, in the millennia, right? So let's say that at some point, and that may be a bit further in time, right? Let's say that at some point some canines started to be around humans, and humans, among the advantages of having those canines around, for guarding the village, keeping other animals away, keeping other canines away, other predators, other elements of disturbance away, would also help in guarding some other animals that were becoming part of the human settlings, right?
Yeah.
So guarding, maybe carrying some heavy stuff, right? So that's the, let's say, cultural technological theory. So canines were integrated and got closer and closer to humans because of the cultural and the technological, the advantage humans were getting from that, right? Yeah. There is also another theory and even more, but this is worth to mention because that has also sparked interest until a certain point, and then has been debated. That is the human getting some wolf pups in the den, right? When they were very puppies, pups, right? Really, very young, yes, very young, right? And then they got those wolves to their villages, and by that strong pressure, because in that case the pressure became much stronger. This is relevant also for what we're going possibly to discuss later.
Yeah.
When you take a puppy and you take it from the wolf's den, that hypothesis is an hypothesis, and you bring it to the village, and now the puppy is with humans around all of a sudden, and maybe eating food directly from the hands of the humans. We can understand that the environmental pressure alias the human pressure, in the sense as we have described before, becomes much stronger than the pressure that is influencing a wolf that is approaching by his agency and by his pace a village, right? That decides when to get closer, when to stay far away, to detect the human behavior. Am I safe or not to get closer? Should I behave this way or the other way? It takes time, right? With the puppies, in this theory, the door was open straight away, right?
Yeah,
And
so they
also,
can imprint on the human
well,
as well then, can't they?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And also being those puppies, so representing a way less dangerous exposure for human, until at a certain point, they were treated with more, with more ease, with certainly with more ease from humans. So this means that humans, until at a certain point, probably were we can speculate that those humans were less stressed and less fearful of those puppies because they were puppies, right? Maybe they were even affectionated in the sense that maybe those puppies were spending time with human puppies, with human kids, in the village with the women raising both kids and puppies, while males were away for still some hunting activities or territory exploration and so on, right? So this is a bit also that has been debated because especially because not easy to get puppies from a den. No. It may happen, although it may is not easy. And yeah, some of our ancestors may have also killed their mom, their father, and got the puppies, but the numbers, it would be so little to see that the entire process of domestication may have happened around that thing, right? Around that process, right? And also we have archaeology that also with the puppies, we have archaeology found that where we see that some people may have lost fingers due to bites on the hands, right? Just fingers, right? Which means that may be relevant in the sense that, okay, maybe some human hands have gone into the den, but maybe it wasn't successful in some cases, right? So there is no strong evidence, but for what I recall, there is also some evidence of that. But long story short, actually, we cannot really make it short, but we try.
Oh, that's fascinating. And it's just, it's trying to, get those time frames and the kind of experiences that dogs might have gone through with the domestication and the impact of humans and the dogs, which is really, I mean, that's kind of where we go to with Michele a little bit, because the impact of us as humans on these dogs, which might have had very limited experience of humans before they're then perhaps rehomed and moved to a new country. And certainly thinking about the environment, Marco, that you mentioned as well. I never thought of it like that. I thought about where dogs, might have come from, but the fact they might be used to mountains, or they might be used to the sea, or they might be used to other. It's not something that I've really thought about.
Yeah. And then following the example of the pub, I'm trying to say, I mean, not sure if you are familiar with the pub. I mean, to some extent, I'm just trying to mention, trying to mention an environment that can be somehow familiar with for everybody here. But but following that example, it's like sometimes we take for granted, or to some extent at least, that dogs know how to behave in a pub, right? Or that all of us in the metaphor know how to behave in a pub, right? But believe me, when I enter a pub, according to where this is geographically, I feel I need to be smart and sharp and fast learner in understanding what's the dynamic in there, even just to ask for a drink, even
It's
just to ask
adapting.
how to pay, and
Yeah.
right?
Adapting all the time to that situation. And
adapt, yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
But yeah, we can for sure we can talk about this also later when if we have time. Of course, we can discuss a little bit about this struggling process of adaptation that some dogs may have to go through, right?
Yeah.
But to sum up a little bit on domestication, yeah, that at some point happened. In a few points happened, right? Through some points happened. But why that happened? It happened because it was advantageous for both those two species. Both those two species found advantage in that process, right? But not just we found advantage. We found, without understanding why, without knowing why, and indeed we are still trying to figure out why, we found some strong similarities. We realized that actually this four-legged animal could understand us. And we, without knowing how, we figured out that we could understand them. So we had some similar cognitive abilities, and now we're understanding this more and more scientifically through evolutionary biology, human-canine cognition, comparison, right? We could understand each other. And that has been a revolution in the history of species in general, because those two species, by understanding each other, started to support each other throughout their mutual evolution. We may have heard about this term of coevolution in some cases, even though it's a bit slippery, because coevolution really means, biologically speaking, means that we really have developed some physiological, deep biological skills and transformations, to put it simple, due to the presence of the other species. We're still trying to figure out to which extent we can talk about coevolution. Maybe in some cases, parallel evolution is more appropriate as a term. So we evolved in parallel, and we mutually influenced each other. And that started, as said, a few thousand years ago, and then went through the millennia, went through the centuries, and went through the last 50 years, and went through the last companion dog that all of us have adopted, for example, right? And so, as we mentioned also before, there are different lenses through which we can look at domestication. The long-term domestication, which started, as we have described, a few thousand years ago, different degrees, different places, different modalities. It started to happen, right? And then that goes up to maybe 300 or 400 years ago, even a bit less in some cases, where this process of domestication, which was mostly unintentional, although in some cases was also intentional in terms from provoked, intentionally generated by humans, because as we said, some human pressure may have become more important due to the ability of some dogs to, or some canines, but at this point we can start talking about dogs, to support humans in some work activities, right? So we may have bred already some dogs for guarding, hunting, right? Already already 1 or 2,000 years ago, or even a bit less, right? So this is still in the range of the long-term domestication, right? But then 3,000 years ago, we started to play closely, play more, starting to get a bit more curious and interested in exploring more combinations, right? Combinations of behavior, combination of colors, shape, and so forth, right? And that is the medium-term domestication, right? Which relates to the breeds that we have created in the last few hundred years, right? Especially in the last 150 years, right? And that is the medium period of domestication. That is, we have selected. That is, human pressure became much stronger and turned into a selection of certain behavioral or physical traits in order to satisfy no longer just the working activities, which was essential for survival, but also pleasurable traits, right? Pleasurable traits that may relate to color, may relate to the shape of the ears, may relate to more, for example, culturally, anthropologically, the type
and the
of
role they played, isn't it? Some were just literally companion dogs, whereas some have roles. So I presume that kind of evolved from that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And then, okay, let's cut a little bit here, because there will be much more to say on the breeding period, which is still ongoing, indeed. And then what we mean as short domestication is the short time that an individual dog may go through, may cross, and that describes a sudden or progressive yet fast transformation in the behavior and lifestyle of a dog. And again, this is fractal. We can see the transformation in the lifestyle of a dog, in the life of a dog, in the behavior of a dog, in the lifetime of a dog, even in just 1 year of the life of a dog, as well as we have seen that in a larger time frame, like in 2,000 years back in time, right? So we need to be aware that the individual time of a dog, the individual life of a dog, can be also a terrain where domestication happens. And this comes to our lives nowadays, to those furry friends living with us, with our clients, that are also going through a process of domestication under our human pressure. So we need to be aware of that, and we need to become more and more aware of what type of pressure are we making. And again, this is not intentional pressure in the sense I'm pushing the dog to do something. It's environmental pressure, right? Just by being present, this is somehow conditioning the dog. And now we can learn about this pressure, become aware, redirect this pressure in order to support, for example, the individual process, the process of an individual dog, right? And I stop a little bit here, so I leave some space, because I know I can talk and talk.
Yeah, Marco, we have lots of questions for you, so we'll do those at the end if that's okay. But we've got quite a few questions for you. It's so fascinating, because exactly what you talk about here about the pressures is exactly what I know Julia's spoken about in her book as well, is that it's the environmental pressures as well. You deal a lot with behavior pressures. What we're going to bring Michele in now is those environmental pressures that we put these dogs under. and even in the UK, really, probably only over about the last 40 or 50 years, the changes to our homes and our houses is phenomenal because, for example, my parents' house, we had carpet. You always had carpet down. And those changes now where we all want laminate floors and easy clean, but the impact on our dogs is just enormous. So it's not only the behavioral pressures of those, but it's also the physicality. So I'm just going to ask Michele, you've got a real interest in rehoming international dogs. And I just love you just to tell us lots about this because it's fascinating.
Yeah, I've rehomed dogs from various countries, and I thought quite experienced at this. However, when I rehomed two Romanian rescue dogs, I quickly realised they're much more complex, and I needed to gain an understanding on them. Their behaviours are so different, and they're inbuilt. They're independent thinkers, they're watchers, they're quick decision makers. They really fascinate me. They're just totally different from anything else I'd come across. And their enhanced survival skills leave them likely to be much more reactive in certain situations. So it's important that we understand these behaviours, to enable them to settle into a domesticated environment. I mean, following my experiences, I've integrated the myotherapy side and my learned knowledge to try and help these dogs. They're not used to touch, so it's quite tricky. You have to gain their trust, get them used to massage. It has to be taken very slowly, very patiently. However, massage is just so key and important. Often they suffer from a state of heightened arousal, and these dogs really struggle to manage their emotions. And situations can just escalate very, very quickly. And massage plays such an important part to help with this. With hands-on treatment, you're not only relieving the muscular tension and improving circulation, but endorphins are released, all of which will contribute to a dog both physiologically as well as their emotional well-being. And new guardians, they can really help build bonds and trust with the dog by using massage. But from a Galen myotherapist point of view, through myotherapy sessions, we can assess areas of tension, any possible issues that could be pain related, and obviously then could be contributing towards possible behavioural issues. And obviously, as a Galen myotherapist, we always look at the whole dog. So it's, we can assess the whole dog. From my experience, though, it takes time, to gain the trust. However, once these dogs get used to massage, they're so receptive. Often, I've been presented with a body part that they want me to treat because they feel that's the bit that's tight, and quite often they're right. They're just amazing. They're so rewarding, but I feel we must learn to understand their complex natures and to help them live alongside us. I really do.
So that idea of the independent thinker as well is very much, it's not just the independent thinking comes to actually like this is the bit that's sore, I want you to treat that.
Yeah.
Because they guide you and they're a lot more open in some ways, are they? And honest in, when I say honest, but they're very open in their emotions, if you
Uh,
like.
yeah, they are. If once you get them to trust you and you understand them, that's the thing. You have to understand how they tick. Once you get how they tick, they're so intelligent, so intelligent. With just that, showing me what they want done
Out
and
of interest,
asking for it
Michele, the
done.
dogs that you've your own dogs, how old were they when you adopted them?
My first one was only about 11 weeks old,
Oh wow.
and she was found in a field, frostbitten ears, very, very poorly. And she was completely shut down and very frightened. Whereas the other one, Lyra, I got when she was 8 months old, and she was completely different. She's aggressive, mouthy. So they're two real ends of the scale.
Yeah. So the impact as well that you see with these dogs are some of their past experiences, but experiences as well of the effect of environment that might have had on these dogs.
Yeah, I mean, Nellie in particularly, she's very sensitive and she was frostbitten, so I'm sure that's had an effect. That, you know, nutritionally, they're not getting everything they need. Their muscles, when they come over here, they have next to no muscle, no fat. They're like little bits of cardboard, you know, very, very thin. And obviously, they haven't been able to develop properly. So all of that has an impact ongoing um, with them. Yeah.
So yeah, it's really interesting. It's just understanding that their kind of background and how the impact it then has. It's tying together what Marco was saying, which is fascinating,
Yeah.
with their, you know, kind of the background that they've had to, you know, what we're then putting them into here,
Yeah.
and that coping environment around all of the things, jumping in and out of cars. You know, they wouldn't have done that.
Cars, stairs. Yeah. You know, the cars, stairs, furniture, all of the things they've not ever had to do. It's all new to them, and that all impacts their bodies.
Yeah. So it's really getting people, guardians, to look at their dogs with a whole new set of eyes and going, right, what has this dog never been exposed to? How can I incorporate their physicality, not only their emotional needs, but their physical needs into a new home when they're adopted, or they are rehomed into those environments? Because the emotional impact must be huge, but the physical as well is, you know, there's a lot of things that we perhaps do as humans aren't brilliant. They're not kind, they're not good. You know, we put dogs in crates, we do things like this. But you know, that's going to have an impact on these dogs' physicality, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's all just completely alien to them, our homes and what we do, and how we put them on a lead and we take them for an hour-long walk. You know, they're not used to that. They're used to just wandering about doing what they want. All of that has an impact. It's getting people just to understand where they've come from, what they've been through, and where we're putting them. Um,
That
like I
choice, isn't
said,
it? That choice of
yeah,
freedom,
it
that
is.
choice of movement, and all
Yeah,
of those movements, patterning that they would have done perhaps when they were free roaming, or, you know, the fact that they would have had, we know a lot of studies that have been done, don't we, about the free roaming dogs and actually how little they move. They don't go far,
exactly.
do they?
Mm.
You know, they stay within a 1 or 2 kilometer square, I think. You know, they don't go far. And all of a sudden we're taking them out for a, you know, a 10-kilometer walk on a lead.
Yeah,
Um, so the physical impact of that is going to be quite pronounced, really, isn't it? Because as you say, Michele, the musculature is not going to be there. The free movements that they would have done, we're going to put them on a lead and walk them in that linear line. We're going to be walking them in straight lines. Um, so not only the mental, the fact that they can't choose and they can't sniff and they can't smell when they'd like to, but the impact we put on their bodies as well. Brilliant. I've got quite a few questions that I think have come through. Michele, is there anything that you would like to ask Marco, or anything you'd like to say to him just as we
yeah.
go?
I was just fascinated by the whole pub analogy. I think that really sums. I mean, everything you said was amazing, but that pub analogy just really is a great one for the Romanian dogs. If you're thinking where you're bringing them from and where you're taking them to, and how do they act? What do? They don't know. I found that very interesting, and one I'll probably steal and use.
They did, yeah. They don't, yeah. Go on, Marco.
Yeah, please use it. Actually, yeah, that's what we need. We need to as educators, as facilitators also of those topics. We need to, I believe, we need to borrow from each other's ideas and convey those to colleagues, to people, to dog caretakers, to help facilitate the understanding of those topics. So, yeah,
It's interesting
absolutely.
because
I'm happy you like it.
Yeah, it's a lot of dogs that we treat. Obviously, you know, we are able to treat with so many dogs which have got issues. Perhaps they're worried, they're fearful, under that title of behavioral issues. But you know, we're able to treat them because we use positive pact, and because we watch the dog's body language, we listen to what they're trying to tell us all the time. But these dogs have actually got that extra challenge, because although the dogs might come to us, they've got that additional layer that we've got to break through as well, haven't we? Is that we're trying to, you know, a lot of dogs would actually might have issues, but they're used to the domesticity environment. They're used to that domestic environment. But some of these dogs aren't even used to the domestic environment. So they're not only dealing with being in that environment, but they're also then dealing with us doing hands-on work and reading their body language, which sometimes, you know, they're doing everything double, aren't they? They're trying to, there's so much they're dealing with.
Yeah, it's
because you've got a lot of experience with that, Michele, haven't you? Of treating these.
yeah, I mean it is really tricky, and in a lot of cases I have to get the guardian to do the first initial hands-on, getting them used to it, because they're just not used to being touched. They don't like being touched. So they need to gain the confidence and understanding of what we're trying to do to them. But yeah, it's tricky. There's a lot going on in their little heads when they come over, an awful lot that they've got to contend with.
And if I may, if I can, I want to add a piece there that is, in some cases, it's true that, for example, some dogs come from certain areas, remote areas, where they haven't been exposed to human influence so much, including human touch, for example. But in some other cases, it's also that reactivity to touch may be the consequence of the trauma they have experienced while being taken away from their lifestyle and being put maybe in a crate and being put maybe in a cargo or whatever, on a plane, whatever may have gone through. And then by the time they get to the new environment, they're so traumatized and so fearful and so reactive to any type of input that may not be inclined to be touched by this new person now, with all the best intention that the new person may have, but now they are traumatized, right? Which is also the core of the paper that Michele was mentioning before, Healthness or Wellness, where we actually describe the drama of those dogs. And let me put it in the chat if somebody's curious and want to go and read it. The trauma of those dogs being taken away from their areas. In some cases, that's necessary. I'm not saying that's not necessary. That's always not necessary. That's never necessary. In some cases, it is because of animal welfare concerns. But in other cases, it could be evitable. It could be, it could be avoided, right? But one way or the other, those dogs that in some cases are taken away from their area, from their families, from their conspecifics, from other dogs, from people they are used to, that from people they may associate to, from people who can touch them confidently and they're happy with that. But by the time they get taken away by all of that environment, all of those elements of their environment, of their lifestyle, and they got put into, a van or car, and then they got transported, and they get handled by people who have best intentions but maybe don't understand dog trauma or whatever may go through. And then by the time they get to the new house, the new home, they certainly, at least for the first period, they don't want to be touched, right? So what happens is that in some cases they are reactive to that because they have lost trust of humans, right? So what happened there is an inversion process of domestication, that is feralization. So they go back into the process of domestication, they go back to being feral to some extent. They don't really become feral, especially if we're talking about dogs who are living in proximity of humans, but they go into the reverse process, right? So they lose a certain degree of trust from humans, and then now those humans in the new place, with possibly with the support of some of us, some facilitators, with using various tools, physical, behavioral, various tools, that now they need to go through the process of domestication again to some degree, and get again exposed and trustful with humans, so that they may have a less reactive and more balanced emotional life.
And a better life, isn't it? Because they're not in that state
Absolutely.
of stress and worry the whole time. I have got a couple of questions, if that's all right. Marco, mainly for you, I think, but the first one is from Suzanne. I hope I say this all right. Do you think that the way we interact and communicate with dogs have an influence on the ongoing domestication process? And where does epigenetic come in?
Well, it absolutely has an impact on the domestication process, as we have said, is an ongoing, at least in my view. Maybe as everything in domestication, there may be no agreement on that, but in my view, is an ongoing process. And my view is both an anthrozoological view, as somebody who studies canines, but also as a behavior consultant, as a dog trainer, as somebody that has been in many situations where dogs need help and people need help. So on a very practical level, you need to figure out what's happening there, what's the background of the dog, what's the background of people, how to facilitate, how to help them to sort out issues, right? To figure out how to solve certain issues, right? And how to help all of them to be more balanced and more happier in life, right? So certainly that has an impact. Epigenetic is a quite new field of research. It refers to the fact that the genetic changes according to the pressures and the needs that we have, right? It has been explored a lot in humans, but we are still at the beginning. We are trying to understand how this works. But certainly, it plays a role to some extent. We can say that for sure it plays a role, because as epigenetics change our life and change our behavior and change our physiology in some cases, it changed that of dogs. And so the environmental pressure, again, as we said before, has an impact on that. And so dogs, by adapting their behavior and by going through what we have named as short-term domestication, that also may have an impact on their genetic, and therefore maybe on the litters, on the new generation that may come from those dogs. So it's certainly an interesting topic, an interesting question, slippery also because we don't have yet such an extended understanding of epigenetic, but certainly not in the transformation that brings into dogs interacting with humans. But I do believe that it plays a role.
Brilliant. I hope that answers your question, Suzanne. That was so interesting. It's mind-blowing. It really is. I've got a question from Sophie saying that I believe they've done studies on grey wolf puppies, assessing human-raised pups, imprinting on the memory, imprinting and memory. I can't remember the details, but they found there was a key imprint period during which they strongly bond with their social group, other wolves, or in this case, people, and will recognize them for a very long time, versus wolves exposed to people later in life. I know she's put the link in here. Sophie, if you're there, if you want to add.
Yeah, sorry. I don't think the link was from me. I think that was just, whoever popped up with that one. Yeah, so it was less of, I suppose, less of a question and more just is that, it's been a while since I came across that, but is that something that features in sort of your research and studies? And I think the study was looking at wolves. If there was like a key period for wolf puppies which differed from dogs, in which using scent more as their primary sense, where they sort of imprinted really strongly on pack members, and so if that was humans, as in some of the studies, they did remember those humans for years and years and years, whereas wolf puppies who'd passed that period but had human exposure later, although they sort of did show some kind of familiarity with people, they lost it quite quickly. So even if they met those caregivers again in a few years, they just didn't really show the same recognition. And I think it was a commentary on that kind of crucial social adaptation that wolves have, and it's such this important period based on scent. It's less of a question and just more like,
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of those wow moments, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Sorry.
It's interesting you were talking as well, though, Marco, about the kind of the fact that they revert back to feral, or they can do quite quickly, because I know a lot of people that have been involved in looking for dogs who've been lost, whether they've been scared by something, a loud noise that had gone off, or if they've been involved in an accident and had run off. And it doesn't take long for that recession, isn't it, to go back into that feral environment, because their guardian can be stood across the field from them, but literally the trauma that the dogs have gone through, they won't go to the guardian, and they just literally, they will hide, they will go nocturnal. And it really doesn't, to do a lot of people, the fact that it kind of recesses back so quickly.
Yeah. Let me see. Can you, my mic is on? Okay. Yes, absolutely. And it can be very quick in both ways, right? Both from domestic to feral and from feral to domestic, let's say, just to understand what we're talking about, right? It can be both ways. In fact, the Bali dog study, which was maybe mentioned before, it addressed exactly this. The sudden transformation. The whole study was conceived because in my time in Bali, working and observing free-ranging dogs in a preliminary period, and then working as a behavior consultant in the house of people, in the home of people, mostly international people living in Bali adopting dogs, Bali dogs, as companion dogs into their home. So taking dogs from the street and bringing to their home, right? And observing that the behavior of those dogs was changing rapidly within 3 or 4 weeks. This was a completely different dog, right? Why this? Because the environment around them and the human pressure was dramatically changing, was suddenly changing, right? So to some extent, they were becoming more, sweeter, or
Yeah.
more
More appealing to the human.
favorable to a certain time. Yeah, more, more interested into their specific human, less interested in some other humans. But actually they were becoming, and what we have seen in the study, they were becoming way more reactive toward other dogs, toward other strangers, and with a higher prey drive, right? So can you imagine those dogs living as free-ranging dogs? they don't care at all about this lizard there, that rat there passing by. They just look at it and say, ah, you're there. Good for you, you know? And then all of a sudden becoming a companion dog and becoming very, very interested, very, very alert. You would expect the opposite, right? So you ask that to the average person, and say, what do you think? Dogs are more reactive towards moving little animals if they are free ranging or if they are companion dogs, alias free ranging dogs being adopted in those areas where free ranging dogs live, right? And you would expect that answer. Oh, of course, if they are free ranging because they are more wild, you know, this type of narrative is actually the opposite. They don't care or barely care about a moving animal unless they want to play, unless they want to, they want to get. They deliberately choose to do something with that, but otherwise they're not bothered. They're not particularly interested in most of the cases, at least in those cases we have been observing. While if they become companion dogs, they become more reactive to that, right? So what happens? They shift some behavior, some emotional traits also in a very rapid period, right? And so that applies to all the personality traits, all the behavioral traits. I mean, let's say maybe not necessarily to all, but we can say that that's broadly applied to all the lifestyle of a dog, right? To all the characteristic of a dog, right? So a dog may change behavior or emotional approach to things, to life in a very sudden, in a very short period of time, right? And that may relate to becoming more domestic in some traits or more feral in others. And that's what we have discussed before. So in other words, the environmental pressure has a tremendous impact on dogs, right? And human, as part of being an environmental pressure, the human pressure as part, an important, a relevant, an essential part of the environmental pressure, has a tremendous impact on the behavior of the dog and on the process, one way or the other, on in between that the dog goes through, right? So
that is fascinating.
That makes things a bit even more complicated.
It does, but it kind of brings us full circle almost with that. So that brings us all the way around in this lovely big circle. So I think we're probably going to call it there because we've had a little bit of time getting online. It's now got to 8:30. Marco, I have no idea. It must be at 9:30 where you are, but we've got other questions still to go. But what we're going to do is we're going to get Marco and Michele to come back. And we're going to do another one of these so that we can tie up any questions that we might have and also just listen a little bit more and explore more. So if there's more you'd like to hear on this subject, please drop us a line. Let us know, because we're going to try and persuade Marco and Michele to come back, because it is fascinating and we've only just scratched the surface tonight. But I want to say a huge, huge thank you for both of you for coming along. Absolutely loved it, and I've learnt so much, and I hope everyone here has as well. So thank you so much for coming, and we will definitely be back with part 2. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you all again in the near future. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.